You're listening to the Farmer's Guardian podcast. Hello and welcome to this Farmer's Guardian Ag in My Land special with me, FG's online editor, Emily Ashworth. So, what's Ag in My Land? Ag in My Land is a series that I've run now for, years, and it looks at farmers across the world. I've spoke to farmers in Norway, France, Australia, America, all sorts of wonderful people from all over the globe. And in this episode, in the first ever podcast I've done internationally, I speak to Greg Hart, who farms in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. He has a really huge passion for biodiversity and regenerating the land, but also creating a community around the farm. We talk about his partnership with Air New Zealand and how that has improved the farm. We talk about the extreme climate and about the need to connect people, just like we do here in the UK, back to the land and back to food. So, do you want to just tell me, Greg, about you first? Because are you from a farming background? Are you from a farming family?
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in the South Island, about an hour south of Christchurch, on a farm that my grandparents lived on and my parents, and then I always wanted to be a farmer. And then going through my sort of teenage years, had a bit of a back injury, and doctors sort of told me that you probably won't be able to work on a farm. And so after finishing school, I worked for a couple of years and got a degree in agriculture. So, give myself some options and with those qualifications. But my back came right, and I did work in a farm consultancy firm and some professional lines before traveling overseas for a couple of years. Spent some time in Africa and also a rugby season up in Yorkshire, just out of Hull.
Oh, okay.
Got to travel around and had a lot of good times there and a lot of fun. And then back to New Zealand and a couple of more years and sort of office-based jobs before an opportunity came up to buy the farm alongside where my parents had shifted from the South Island to the North Island while I was overseas. And so, the opportunity came to buy a bit of land beside them, and my parents helped me into that. And over that time, I'd met my wife Rachel, and we got married. And she was a local girl from the Hawke's Bay area, and so we came back to sort of her home territory and started farming alongside my parents. And so you probably want to know a little bit about the farm. So we're 1,500 acres, and it's a mixed sort of flat, rolling, and steeper hill country mix. So it's a really nice mix of land classes, which keeps it all very interesting. We've got an 80-acre lake right out in front of our house, and
Wow.
New Zealand has been largely cleared of native forest, but we're really fortunate that we've got 30 acres of old forest still on the farm. And we'll talk about how we've developed and planted a lot more trees, but having that base is quite rare around these parts, as the land has largely been denuded of trees, and what's planted back is exotic trees around here. So it's nice to have that indigenous forest on the farm. And the farm is sorry. So we're basically farming sheep and beef. Yeah. So we're farming sheep and beef, and been on this journey of what's now called regenerative agriculture. And so we've gone from at one stage running 3,000 breeding ewes on the farm to now having about 30. But we're currently farming about 750 cattle. And we can get into just the whole philosophy around how it's easier for us to manage cattle under a holistic planned grazing scheme than it is for sheep. But we also have a whole lot of diversity on the farm. We've got an eco lodge, accommodation, and a few chickens and pigs, and lots of diversity going on. Just some various sort of different income streams, which has been really good when you go through all the ups and downs of farming.
That's it. And we'll get onto that sort of diversification topic in a minute, because it's quite similar over here in terms of farmers finding other income streams to bring that finance back to the farm. But in terms of livestock then, what do you actually run then in terms of breeds?
Yeah, so we are basically farming Aberdeen Angus cattle. We have 100 breeding cows, and so we keep the progeny from our cattle, and we buy in heifers, females from our neighbour has a big herd of 400 breeding cows. And our core business really is supplying beef to butchers. And we have a mob of just under 100 dairy heifer grazers. So that's just, again, diversifying our income. They belong to a dairy farm, and we just raise them for 1 year, get them in calf, and then they go back to their dairy farm. But, it's just a steady income stream. So that's a bit of diversity. And at this stage, we just buy in lambs and fatten them, finish them to prime, and then sell them back into the market. So that's the core of our business.
And in terms of, I really want to talk about how you mentioned regen ag before. Can you talk me through some of, like your core farming principles and how you actually run things on farm? Because, that's a term obviously that is used heavily in the UK as well. And actually, government subsidies are very much now leaning towards sustainable environmental farming. So if you could tell me a little bit about how you do things, and
Cool.
if there's any actually government support for you as well in terms of what you do, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's been a long and winding journey, and it began for us now probably a bit over 20 years ago. And like you as a young mother thinking about, the world we're going to leave for our children, and then particularly, from my wife's perspective, what food you're giving to our children, because you think a lot deeper when you about the next generation, and so that was probably the beginning of a journey for us. And then also learning a whole lot of sustainability issues, and I guess particularly a little country like New Zealand down the bottom of the earth, of the planet, we rely on bringing in phosphate fertilizers from Morocco, which is basically what sustains our pastoral agriculture here in New Zealand. We used to get phosphate fertilizer from Nauru, a Pacific island, but that's been dug out and basically, left for ruins. And now we're having to bring in our phosphate from the other side of the planet. And to me, that just didn't seem a sustainable system to base, the production of food, and the cornerstone of the New Zealand economy is pastoral agriculture. And so that's sort of sent us on a journey for trying to find more sustainable ways to maintain our production, and then also just learning more about environmental issues, climate change. And a really big one for me has been understanding the role that energy plays in every aspect of our life. Of course, lots of fossil fuels involved with getting that phosphate fertilizer from Morocco down to a farm in New Zealand before it's flown onto our hill country. And our whole system doesn't work without cheap, abundant fossil fuels. And it appears to me that in the not too distant future, it's not going to be so readily available or as cheap. And so everything changes. So how do we adapt when that time comes? And the other thing is about regenerating the land. There's a biodiversity crisis, and how do we start to incorporate bringing back trees and birds and insects, and try and restore a balance between our productive agriculture and the needs of people, but also understanding that that biodiversity and that nature is also essential for our survival and our well-being.
So talk to me about, because obviously, you mentioned numbers have been cut quite dramatically on farm. Talk me through that thought process.
Yeah, well, I guess part of that has been a big tree planting program. And so I was back in late 2007, I realized we needed more trees on the farm, and farm budgets don't have a whole lot of spare cash for buying a whole lot of trees. So I approached Air New Zealand at that time because we were using a Visa card, that generated air points as part of our spend. And while realizing that we should be flying less, due to climate change reasons, and a whole lot of friends that were flying with business were getting a whole lot of air points more than they needed. So I contacted Air New Zealand and said, well, is there an opportunity to for people to swap their air points for a tree planting program, and we'd happily plant them on our farm? And they said no, but they were just starting a new initiative called the Air New Zealand Environment Trust, and they were looking for a project. And so we were just right place, right time. And we got a budget for 3 years, and over that time planted 85,000 trees, the majority of them in New Zealand native trees. And we planted about 50 acres, 20 hectares in natives. And so we have been transferring some of that pastoral land, albeit steep, a road, and doesn't really grow a whole lot of pasture, through our dry summers, and been planting trees. And the other trade-off with that is that our farm is now open to the public, and so which is something that we wanted to do, because we think that so many of the issues that we face now is just through that loss of connection, people no longer understanding where their food's coming from, how it's grown, and that whole connection to nature. So it's been a really, really good relationship with Air New Zealand, and it's been ongoing, and the farm's still open to the public, and we get between 1,500, 2,000 visitors a year to the farm, and they're free to wander out to see the trees, but also experience the lodge and see the animals. So so that accounts for some of the change in stock numbers, but really the other big one is moving from sheep to cattle. And that's just allowed us to use a system devised by Alan Savory, originally from Zimbabwe, and his whole system of holistic management. And Alan was observing the big plains, the big herds of buffalo buffalo in Africa, and how over millennia those animals created some of the deepest, richest soils in the world through massive mobs of ruminant animals constantly moving, tall pasture, trampling, dung, manure, eating, and the whole system just worked and evolved. And so that is what we're trying to mirror now, just with those bigger animals eating taller pasture, dung and urine going back in onto the trampled pasture, which absorbs a lot of the nutrients, and it's just slowly taken into the soil. And that's a system that's working really well for us as we try and reduce our need on that fertilizer coming from the other side of the planet, and just creating those natural systems and using that more natural sort of grazing management. And the system, while it can work for sheep, sheep take a bit more management, they need better fencing, and so it's just been easier for us while we get to grips with this changing grazing management to use cattle, because just with a single wire with a good shock going through it, cattle are really easy to manage.
I find this so interesting, and I am a bit of a history geek, so I love this idea of, take for example here in the UK, we saw a huge price hike in fertilizer, so farmers were having to find alternative ways. And actually, I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, and I'm hoping you can tell me, but there's sort of you can feel it, like a movement going on, like an undercurrent almost of a big group of farmers that are almost turning the clock back and using these more old-fashioned ways of mixed farming principles. Obviously, post-war, we had to, the land was obviously absolutely hammered. Production had to go up, but there's this real feeling that we're actually turning the clock back.
Yeah, but using a whole lot of modern technology, that's enabling it. But it's been so easy over recent decades to basically, and this is a philosophy of holistic management, and it's things that humans seem to do. We're so good at treating the symptom, but not the cause. And holistic management tries to dig at what is the root cause of this problem, Because for now, it's easy just to go to town and buy your solution to that problem out of the bag, whether it be a drug to give your animals or something chemical or something to put on your land. Again, you're just treating the symptoms, but not the cause. And so trying to get to those root causes and be proactive and stay ahead of the problems and yeah, try and really generate health into the system, of the land and soil, and obviously that flows through into the animal.
So, Greg, would your farm be classed as like organic? Would it have like organic status or anything like that?
No, no, we haven't gone down that track. Primarily because my main driver was around sustainability and getting fossil fuels out of production. It's interesting. New Zealand, we are far away from the markets, and we now import all our petrol, diesel, and oil. We have had an oil refinery in New Zealand that was processing the oil, but that's been closed down in the last couple of years. And so I think we're at real risk of potentially being one of the first Western developed countries, whatever, in the world to go through fuel shortages. And so yeah, how can we continue to thrive when that time comes? Because I think it's inevitable. It's just a matter of when. And so that's been our main driver, but also trying to make informed decisions as far as chemical use. And we probably could be certified organic. We do basically manage organically, but I guess we do have those tools in the toolbox if required. And our whole relationship, we've been inspired by an American farmer, Joel Salatin, and his thing is just about being open and transparent, and his farm's open to the public too. And our whole initial goal was really to build that sort of community of support around the farm, and people that buy our produce to know us, know the farm, know how we're operating. So those sort of standards and certifications are really only required where there's a distance between the consumer and the producer. And it's a certification of guarantee of a standard, but we'd like to be building that basically trust as our certification with our end users, the consumers.
Yeah, it's exactly the same here. And actually, it sometimes feels like as an industry, for example, that we're actually doing all we can to really shout about farming, shout about what we're actually doing, tell, let people in. But the flip side of it is actually that people, they do want to know, but actually they're so constrained by price.
Yeah.
Price is at the top of consumers' priority list.
Yeah, for everybody. It's really tough. And yeah, I don't have a solution for that. And we were talking at our lodge last night. We had a fertilizer company who's investing heavily in the environment and trying to help farmers understand a whole lot of environmental factors and support and stuff like that. But sheep and beef farming in New Zealand is going through a tough time at the moment, and so many people are just basically the cheapest thing, and it's really sad. I guess as times get tighter, a lot of those good environmental initiatives get bypassed because it does need some support, and somebody has to pay for it somewhere. And yeah, it's tough.
We have something called Open Farm Sunday in this country, and it's been running for about 18 years. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, we have, and a good friend of mine started the open farms in New Zealand, and it's been pretty well received.
Oh, fab. Do you take part in that, Greg?
We have, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I think welcoming thousands of people on one day onto farms across the country, it's quite an emotional thought, actually, isn't it? Because we don't get to actually share that journey with people very, very often. So yeah.
No. Yeah, and it's good. It's good for farmers too to be appreciated. And I don't know what it's like in the UK, but there certainly has been a perception that there's a growing rural-urban divide, and sometimes it feels like that in the media. But I think like recent surveys have actually shown that basically, town people do support farmers and appreciate what we're trying to do, and it goes back to that economics of it again, isn't it? It's tough for some people who are struggling financially.
Yeah, yeah. Can we quickly talk about climate and the weather? Because this is a question that I always ask in this Ag in My Land series, because, we have had the worst season of rain that we've seen in a very, very long time. It's been the biggest rainfall in a very long period of time. Lambing was a tough time for us in the UK. It's really, really, really put a lot of pressure on farmers. What's the climate like where you are?
It's changeable, and
Throughout the
we
year.
just
Yeah.
we just came off by far the wettest year we've ever recorded last year. It was off the charts, including a massive cyclone in our region that a number of people lost their lives, and flooding the valleys and what have you. So it's just the extremes are becoming more extreme and happening more often. And that last year's wettest year was 2 years. We had sort of 2 years of drought, and now I've had 2 years of extreme wet. So it's just there's no average anymore. It's kind of all over the place, and just having to deal with all that variation, which is adding more challenges.
And is it just you and your family who work on the farm, Greg, or is there a team of you?
So we have one stock manager on the farm. So I've got a young lad from Scotland working for us for a year at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's great. He's been up for dinner tonight at our place, and really, really enjoying having him here. And we have woofers from all around the world come and stay with us. We've just had a French couple left a couple of days ago, and so we get lots of young, enthusiastic energy coming and going through the farm, and that's really cool. And again, that's really restores your faith in humanity. There's just so many good young people out there, and we do see quite a lot coming from UK or Europe, young people who no longer want to do that 9 to 5, bullshit job kind of thing, who are actually looking to do something of meaning, and of being doing something positive for the world. And so we do meet lots of those people, and it's great having them over here.
That was me once.
Yeah. Did you travel to New Zealand?
Not New Zealand, and it's one of, I don't like to have regrets, but it's definitely one of those things in my life where I think I was in Australia, so why did I not just do it while I could? But my husband, he worked on a really large sheep farm in Western Australia, and then when I came out, I obviously did a bit with him. But yeah, it's one of my kick me moments that I didn't just do it while I had the chance, because I think New Zealand
You're still young.
somewhere that, I'll take that.
Yeah. Cool.
In terms of labour and the agricultural workforce, we actually see quite a big problem here in terms of getting people into the industry to work, but also staff retention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that something that you see over there?
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly for the dairy industry in New Zealand, we have a lot of like Filipino people working on dairy farms in New Zealand, and within the horticultural centre, and Hawke's Bay is quite a big apple producing area and vineyards, and we rely on a lot on Pacific Island people coming in and working on those farms and orchards, and so it is an issue. Again, I think we're quite fortunate because we are in that sort of regen space, and have made a commitment to trying to be part of making a better world, and younger people are drawn to that more, and so we do find people, but yeah, again, the labour market's tight.
Yeah, we've been talking about the same thing actually in terms of using this idea of sustainability and regen to actually hook new people in, because there's so much opportunity, there's so much science behind it. Like, it's so interesting, and it's hard to flip that image of what we actually do as farmers.
And I mean, and if I could plug another organization that I follow in America called the Post Carbon Institute. And a couple of years ago, they wrote a white paper called The Future is Rural. And again, if we're going to get fossil fuels or reduce the amount of fossil fuels it takes to produce our food, it's going to need more people living on the land. And so, and there is a growing movement, again, of young people who do want to get back to the land and live more sustainably. And yeah, there's opportunities, and there's going to be a need, because ultimately, I think, we talk about climate change and energy and economy, it's going to hit us hardest in food. And in places in the UK, and relying on food imports from all around the world, yeah, I think it's definitely going to need more people back on the land growing food. And I do follow closely the debate between George Monbiot and his book Regenesis and Chris Smage, and saying no to a farm-free future. And I'm firmly in the Chris Smage, eco agriculture future. And I think that's a future that I want to be part of, and I'd like to pass on to future generations. Sometimes I worry if these techno optimists actually do come right, and we just end up eating gloop in some bubble city, and perhaps just just live our lives virtually on a screen, and that's not living. So yeah, I think let's keep nature and real food and farming going.
Yeah, and I think that, half of that comes back to as well what we've just been talking about, which is just letting people see what this is all about, and they can see for themselves and then make their own decisions on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Kids
um,
get it. Like, if you can get kids with their hands in the soil and wiggly worms, and they love it. And so you've just got to reconnect it all again, and yeah, I think it's essential.
absolutely. And just on that, this is something that I am hugely, hugely passionate about in terms of getting kids involved from a really early age, because that's when you're gonna hook them. What is it like in terms of we don't have any form of agriculture on the curriculum at all. You would have to get to the end of high school when you're 15 or 16 and almost find your own way. There's no kind of input in terms of school. You would then have to decide to go and study agriculture for yourself.
Yeah, well, there are schools in New Zealand that do have agriculture as part of their curriculum, and that is right through high school you can take agriculture. We were supposed to have a school group come and visit this week. They postponed because of the rain, but yeah, so we do have a small population compared to the UK, and lots of farmlands, but there's still a lot of kids growing up in New Zealand that don't experience a farm or farm life, and so that's part of encouraging people to get back onto the land. But there are opportunities to do it, but again, probably the bigger the city, the further removed you are from it.
Yeah, yeah. Do we want to just talk a little bit about, I've got, the article that you sent me to have a look over. It mentioned this agri-hood.
Yeah.
So is that something that you helped to establish?
Yes. It's in the process of, we're not there yet. So in agrihood, the idea there is to create a farm-based community, with people having their business enterprise being in some sort of regenerative business, and it could be land-based. And we have, for example, a small dairy on the farm, which at the moment isn't being used because I don't have the time to do it. But somebody could jazz up the dairy again, be making cheese or something like that, and then somebody else could take the byproducts of, or the waste products from that business and use it for feeding pigs or something, and create another little business there, and just to create the circular economy, and also just to create a whole more livelihoods off the farm, because our farm at 1,500 acres, if it was run conventionally, it's really only probably a one family farm. At the moment we have two of us working plus my wife doing the office work, but that's because we've got a lodge accommodation, and we're marketing our own produce and sort of adding value along the way. But there's so much more we could be doing on the land and providing more livelihoods for a whole lot more people. So, and again, if more people are going to have to go back and live on the land in the future, then I guess it's a bit of an experiment of how that could happen. And I've been really excited just in the last couple of weeks. Came across Kingsclere estate in Britain. And I think it's Tim Bay, so I'm looking forward to catching up with him and their old pitch up about just creating businesses and creating the circular economy. I think that's brilliant, and we want to be doing something similar to that.
I love that, how there's these little pockets all over the world that just, in terms of farming, just connect.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful, and I think that's what it's all about. I've actually got some stuff on Kingsclere that I can send you, Greg, cool. So remind me to do that.
Right. Because, I mean, the other interesting thing is you kind of think like there's nothing new under the sun, because I've had been brewing this idea for quite some time about how we can create this little regenerative farm community. And we had a English farmer come and visit our farm about a month or so ago, and I was telling him about the agri-hood and what we're going to do. And he said, oh yeah, they're doing that in England or the UK. I go, what? And so, yeah, there's just, these little pockets that it's all coming together.
And in terms of, the atmosphere in farming where you are in your country, is there a general kind of positive outlook? Because, it's quite hard over here, because it's almost like two sides of the coin. We've got loads of exciting opportunities. There's people who are really kind of, running at these new incentives and looking to change and adapt or tweak the businesses so that they can future-proof them, and they're really excited by it. But obviously on the flip side of that, there's the conversation, for example, that, the fact that farmers can't just make a living off just farming. And also there's a lot of political uncertainty. It's quite difficult to gauge actually what the outlook is. What is it like over there for you?
It's pretty tough. A lot of sheep and beef farmers are doing it really tough at the moment. I think they've said that well over 90% of sheep and beef farmers won't make a profit this year. The returns are down, particularly for sheep. And the really sad thing is that the price of wool doesn't cover the cost of shearing it at the moment, and it's probably one of the best, most sustainable products on the planet. So that's really sad, and those guys are doing it tough. And then I guess particularly older farmers, and we are probably like all around the world. I mean, I'm 57. I'm probably the average age for a farmer, I guess, nowadays. And with a lot of regulations coming in, it gets overwhelming. And the other big change that's happened in New Zealand over the last couple of years, and I hear it's happening in Wales and that at the moment, is carbon farming. And there's been a lot of land sold to overseas companies that are just planting pine trees in a exotic tree, which is just about a weed in some parts of our country. But the returns they're getting from carbon is just far exceeds what you can earn off of sheep and beef, especially when you're losing money. And so for a lot of farmers, it's just been easier to sell up and take the money and probably retire very comfortably. But that's to the demise of those rural communities and the local schools and a lot of stuff as farm gates just get shut and planted in trees. So yeah, people are doing it tough. I mean, people hang in there. I guess the other thing is, New Zealand for, was the 1980s, removed all subsidies from our export, lamb, beef, agricultural. And New Zealanders, after the initial shock and getting used to that, now I don't think anybody would want to have subsidies back again. I think, we're quite proud that we can sort of stand on our own 2 feet. And but having said that, we are going through a bit of a tough time at the moment, and also, of course, the inputs, the fertilizer and fuel, and I guess the killer is also interest rates. At the moment, you're probably paying, close to 9% interest on your mortgage on the farm at the moment, and that's just a killer for people with debt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is why it's good to do things like this, actually, because sometimes you can feel quite alone, can't you, in what you're doing, especially in farming. So actually to hear that there's other people, not just in your area, around the world, actually, going through these similar thoughts, similar struggles, we need to do more of this because actually we're all in it together.
Yeah, it makes no sense, does it? Because people need food, and it's just, I guess, getting that food to people at a price that they can afford is really tough. And I mean, I love the American quote. Joel Salatin quoted it to me some time ago, just saying how, in the 1960s or whenever, about 10% of the take-home pay or GDP was spent on health and sickness, and 20% was spent on food. That's flipped now, where they're spending in America, 20% on their health and sickness, and 10% on food. And so, yeah, food is our medicine, and we need that to keep us healthy as well.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I would like to end on a positive.
Mm-hmm.
What do you love about what you do, Greg? What do you love about the farm, where you live, and how you're doing it?
Yeah, it is so stimulating, and really do believe that we're super lucky, and I guess appreciate the privileged position that we're in, to be the caretakers of the land, and also to be providing health and nutrition to people, and then it's just the space that we're in. And I think again, all around the world, with a regenerative mindset, which to me, regenerative is just basically, putting life at the center of every decision and action, is it's just uplifting, it's stimulating. There's always so much more to learn. It's said so many times, but the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And so it is super exciting times. People are going to need food. The earth needs regenerating. We need more biodiversity, more trees. And it's a great time to be alive.
I really do hope that you enjoyed being immersed in the New Zealand way of life for about half an hour then. I really do love hearing from farmers around the world because, as we mentioned, many of you are facing the same issues, but also have the same passions. So if you want to see some pictures from Greg's farm, you can head to the Farmers Guardian website and read his full story there. But that's it from me this week, and Farmers Guardian will be back again next week with another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening, and goodbye for now.